Hi there. Welcome to The Preventable, the podcast giving you a seat at the table with conversations about the intersection of alcohol, drugs, and mental health in everyday lives. Take a seat and join us.
Welcome to The Preventable. A big thanks to Hubbard Radio for allowing us to use their space in their recording studio to be able to bring these conversations to our listeners. Today I'm here with Jay Winig. Jay and I met many years ago. I think it was early in my work, even in substance use community work, working with local coalitions. At that time, the SLU campus in Midtown area had the Midtown Coalition, I'm pretty sure was the name of it. And Jay was working at SLU then, and we had that opportunity to meet, and we were doing some work around Coalition, and we just have continued to cross paths over the years, I think. So welcome, Jay.
Thank you.
So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about kind of who you are, what your career path has been in supporting mental health and substance use space, and you're kind of, I guess the population you worked most with has been that college-aged students, if I have that right.
Yeah, that's correct. I moved to St. Louis in 2008 to start the job at St. Louis University in the counseling center, and that was actually my first, foot in the door on a college campus. Prior to that, I worked in different parts of, I came straight to St. Louis from Manhattan, where I was working in a large hospital as a social worker. And prior to that, I was working in Florida at the Seminole Indian tribe of Florida. So I had a pretty interesting background before I came to the university, and was kind of a new field of work for me. And I came to the university with a licensed clinical social worker, but my background, I had a certification in substance abuse. So I was sort of like the guy to, address the substance abuse on campus. And at the time, SLU had a rather strict policy around alcohol. And if somebody would get written up by the university, whether in the residence hall or through an incident on campus, and had to go through the conduct process, very often they would end up at the counseling center getting an assessment. And that was sort of like my introduction to alcohol and substance use on college campuses.
Interesting. So you were really offering the students more support on helping to work through an assessment, kind of determining if there might be more significant concerns or needs for them. Did you also lead the alcohol classes or the other things that they might have to do if they had any disciplinary action because of what has happened on campus?
Yes, that was sort of a work in progress at the time. And one of the things that we were doing is if they had a certain number of let's say violations, there was nearly a requirement that they would have to go to treatment, whether it was an intensive outpatient program or perhaps a residential program. But the university saw that as a really sort of a public health concern and an individual concern with their alcohol use on campus.
Well, that's great that through that public health lens, because that hasn't always been students' experiences on different campuses, that sometimes it is a very punitive approach. So even, at that time looking at that as a public health concern and, that support that might be needed for that student, that's refreshing to hear.
Well, certainly from administration points of view, as well as maybe the medical community. But what that started to create was a lot of tension between what the students themselves felt they needed and what the administration was saying they needed.
Oh, I see.
So sending somebody or mandating somebody to go to treatment didn't always go well because we got a lot of pushback from the students.
Right, because they didn't think that they needed the treatment necessarily.
Very true. And so before I got there, somebody that Meredith Osborne, she was working with the psychologist that was there at the time, and they created what was known as it was called, SHARP program, so the Slew Harm Alcohol Reduction Program. And that was a different type of approach where it certainly was less punitive than going to treatment, but it was more of an educational, preventative, as well as harm reduction approach.
Wow.
And it really had a much better and bigger impact than the previous model.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was involved in facilitating some of the groups for that. And it was more of a didactic. We would have group discussions. There was a movie that was required, and it was more of a group participation. So we would ask people for their input, and nothing was off the table. So we talked about all kinds of sometimes funny stories around their alcohol use and efforts that they could make to reduce their drinking and reduce their problem behaviors associated with drinking.
Yeah. So really taking that approach of allowing them to kind of explore how their drinking is really impacting those other parts of their life too, or whether that be their social or their academic life or however that might look for them.
Yes, and this was a very new approach because we weren't saying absolutely do not drink.
Right.
Because that was a message that they probably heard maybe in high school and certainly at the university. We were saying is, if you're choosing to drink, how can you be safer about it? Mm-hmm. And I think that was what I believe is the right approach.
Yeah, and that was harm reduction before. I guess we could say harm reduction was cool, right? I mean, because now yes. There's a lot of work and a lot of programs that are talking about that harm reduction model and having those realistic conversations around use and of alcohol and even other substances and really kind of meeting that reality of people, making sure that people are safe and still able to be on a path of wellness, even if they're not completely eliminating use at all. But, I think that conversation has come up more and more in today's world, and probably it did at that time when that type of program was first being introduced on a college campus.
Yes, absolutely. And I went through my own changes and viewpoints myself professionally, because I'm a person in long-term recovery, and what worked for me and a lot of the people that are in recovery, the belief that you're either are an addict or an alcoholic or substance use disorder, alcohol use disorder, or you're not.
Right.
And there wasn't a lot of discussion of people that fell in between that. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So when I first started there, and I started to meet with a lot of the students who had certain perhaps incidences on campus, or they were caught in the residence hall and they were sent to me, but they didn't really have any signs of substance use disorder, alcohol use disorder. And just because maybe they got caught more often than they should have, it doesn't mean that they fall into that category. Mm-hmm. And I had to go through my own process of like, well, if they're not, a substance use disorder, and they don't require, 12-step programs, if they don't require treatment, then what can we do to help them reduce their use and manage their college experience without the consequences associated with drinking or college drinking, those type of things. So that's when the SHARP program started to come into play, and other services that we provided, where we took away the judgment or the criticism. We took away if it was required, we would talk about more intensive services, or if they had multiple offenses after coming into the counseling center. But we really took the approach, and like I said, I had to come to my own changes with, there is other ways to meet this need for the students.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the issues that we experienced was when we did send somebody away to treatment and they needed treatment, and maybe they took the semester off, whatever the case might be, when they returned to on campus, we didn't really have any services for these students that did complete a treatment program, that were admitting that they needed to completely abstain and work a program of recovery, they were coming back on campus to their same friends, to the same situation that they were before. And it really told us that we needed to build a better structure around having students return who are sober and how we could help them maintain their sobriety. So we were able to get a small grant to get our program off the ground. And at the time, collegiate recovery communities were starting to pop up across the country. And there are some universities that have really thriving communities with their own residence halls and their own private spaces to study and to hang out without the fear of cannabis or alcohol or other substances being, affecting their recovery.
Right.
So we were able to start what we now call Sober at SLU, which is a support group and sort of a community of people who are either in recovery or are trying to make positive changes in their life. And this is another area where I had to grow personally because, my idea of having a collegiate recovery community was just simply that. It was students that were in 12-step recovery, and this is an on-campus group to support them. But that is a very small population of students.
Yeah.
But a larger population of students were students that were struggling with certain substances, certain behaviors, but they didn't really have a place to go. So I saw that there was a missing service that was provided to the students. So we loosened the barriers there, and I allow anybody to come into the group that has a desire to make positive changes.
So it's not somebody that necessarily has a diagnosed substance use disorder or has identified as being in recovery, but anyone that really is looking to make some different healthy choices in their life.
There are a couple people in there that are in 12-step recovery.
Well, yeah.
But there are also people there that they're have a safe place to talk about it. And sometimes they have, a couple of days, and that we celebrate that.
Yeah.
And then sometimes they reach a few weeks or a month, and again, we celebrate that. And it's small, but I would call it a thriving community where everybody supports each other.
And I think that support is key, absolutely. So we've talked a lot about alcohol, but I'm going to make a wild guess here that that's not the only substance that is a concern among this aged population, the college-age population.
Yes, that's very true. I would have to say that cannabis is a big issue, as we all know, but we do see that on the college campus, and very often college students will reserve drinking to the weekends.
Okay.
Maybe it's one night during the week, but generally they have a philosophy: study hard, party hard, and then so as I mentioned, it's usually held on the weekends and as I mentioned, maybe a weekday.
Yeah.
But people who find themselves using cannabis end up using that every day. And it's one of those things where there are some cases where maybe they use it periodically throughout the day, but very often they go to classes, they do some work, and they tend to use cannabis in the evening time. Sometimes it's a kind of a reward, or it's sort of a validation of a day of good schoolwork or things accomplished.
A way to relax,
Absolutely. Play video games, whatever it is that they do in the evening. And then they start that all over again. And many college students use cannabis as a sleep aid. And they justify, I'm going to, I use cannabis in the evening after everything's done to relax, as we talked about, but also to help me sleep.
So is this a trend or a pattern of behavior, whatever we want to call it, that you've seen since you started kind of this work with the college community, or have you seen that change since we've seen changes in, legalization status around cannabis or availability of cannabis in different products, or has it kind of always been this way?
I think since it's become legal, I think people are more comfortable talking about using it medicinally. And I don't remember a lot of people using, cannabis for sleep purposes or until recently.
Yeah.
I think that is more something that's a little bit more common recently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think, I know that some of the perception, we know cannabis has been around forever. I mean, that's no secret, but it does seem that sometimes, or not sometimes even, but that perception has changed, in the last 10 years with change. Like I said, when there's different types of products available. So, maybe people that have gotten the message that, smoking is harmful to your lungs and your health. And so we don't want to, inhale that smoke. But now there's more edible products or vapor products that might appear to be less harmful than a traditionally, maybe smoked cannabis product. So I just am, aware of looking at research and data that some of those perceptions have changed over time. So I was just curious, if that's changed student behavior at all too.
Well, I certainly think that they can use cannabis in a way where there's less chances of getting caught and less more convenient ways where it some of the products don't have a strong smell, so they're able, as I mentioned earlier, smoke periodically throughout the day, and because it's something that they could just bring with them and use it and then not leave a cloud of smoke somewhere.
Or a smell or anything like that. Yeah. So when we most recently connected again, you were telling me more about this topic around cannabis and student use of cannabis and some different, I don't know how you want to describe them, like programs or approaches that you're taking in your practice with young people, young adults, to address some of their behaviors and the need to continue these conversations around cannabis.
Yes. From the years working at SLU in this program that I viewed as very successful with the college students, that SHARP program that I mentioned, I created something based on those principles to use in the general public for people who don't, outside of the university, that could benefit from this. And as I mentioned earlier, that there is sort of a gap in services, because if somebody has a substance use problem, they typically would go to a treatment center where they generally talk about complete abstinence. And at times there are people that aren't ready for that.
Right.
And even at our Sober at SLU group, some people say, well, weed's the problem, so but it's okay for me to drink because alcohol's never been a problem for me. So if I could eliminate that, I can continue to drink. And, the jury's still out on that if they're able to manage that successfully. But the point being is that I believe that there's a gap in services that can be filled by this program that I've created, which is the CARRP program.
CARRP?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's the Cannabis and Alcohol Risk Reduction Program.
Yeah.
So it goes by the same principles, non-judgmental approach, having fun discussions around managing substance use better, and primarily alcohol and cannabis products. The other thing I wanted to mention, just to go back to the university, I do see a lot of Adderall use or stimulant use. And it really seems that, and they're getting it through prescription, through proper channels.
Yeah.
but it is surprising how easily it is prescribed. And I think college students particularly have trouble balancing that use along with these other things that I was talking about. But the SHARP program at the time and the CARRP program really are based on primarily alcohol and cannabis use.
Yeah.
If somebody is reporting other substance use that may be an issue, that wouldn't be a good fit for this program, as it wouldn't be a good fit for the program that we had at SLU.
Yeah. So for the CARRP program, it's the general public, so it's not specific to the SLU population. Is it open to any adult, or is it really focused on that young adult population still?
It would be split into two.
Gotcha.
An adolescent group, so people who are in high school and that type of age group, and people who are adults. And it's been mostly the younger emerging adults into their 20s. Tends to be that age group, maybe as much as into the 30s. That seems to be for the cannabis. Alcohol certainly is something that more adults are using in their social lives, and but this CARRP program, I would say it's geared for adults and for high school.
Yeah. So how's it going? I mean, what's the reaction been? How's the program been working?
Well, I'm finding that it's been challenging with the marketing component of it because I think universities want to, handle some of these issues on campus in-house.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the biggest issue is how do I get the word out? And still waiting to properly market that out there. But when I tell people about it, they seem very excited about it. When I tell professionals about it, that they seem excited about it. They say that there's a need for it. It's a great idea, those types of things. But I'm struggling to get the word out and get people engaged in that service.
So if any of our listeners are interested in connecting with you or learning more, what's the best way to do that?
They can check out my website at winigcounseling.com.
And that's Winig.
COUNSELNIG.
So winigcounseling.com. Gotcha.
And you could reach me that way, or my phone number is 314-596-2599 to give me a call.
Yeah.
And you could email me through my website.
Perfect. Yeah, I know that, I was excited when I heard, your ideas and the program because it is such a need. Because there is this gap in, individuals who might be using substances, not really even maybe understanding all of that impact around alcohol or cannabis use, and again, maybe not meet the traditional indicators for treatment, but need that additional support and need to be able to have that safe place to have these conversations, and that knowing that, they're nuanced, right? It's not just that easy to say, just don't use, or don't use this way, or don't, but thinking really about, okay, so what does this mean for me? Or what does this mean for the things happening in that person's life? So I mean, that really is a powerful part of the program.
Yes, absolutely. And also what I was talking about before, the Sober at SLU group at SLU, how we bring together a couple people in recovery, a couple people that are struggling to reduce their substance use. And it seems to work really well as far as that, and supporting each other. And I believe the same type of thing can work through, let's say, my practice, offering a group like that where they can have a safe place to talk about some of their struggles and just feel welcomed in for that. And, the preference would be for them to complete that program first so they have that foundation of what the message is and that harm reduction or, risk reduction aspect of it, and then use this as sort of like a continued support group going forward to help them maintain their goals.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it makes so much sense. And we have seen over and over again, and we've talked about it on this podcast with guests several times about that the power of peers in that positive way of being able to relate to other people who might be having similar experiences, and then avoiding some of that isolation or thinking that, no one else is feeling the things I'm feeling, or no one else is having these experiences. And when we can create those opportunities for people to come together around those things, it just amplifies all of the work that we're doing in behavioral health in a lot of different spaces.
So true. I think that people don't have other people to go to. Like, for an example, you can't necessarily go to your friends and say, yeah, I'm really trying to cut back on my use. Maybe they would support you, but if they're not there where you are, they may not be your greatest ally in making those changes. Mm-hmm. So it could be a little intimidating going to a group of people you don't know, but there is that common thing, just like in any 12-step group. You have that connection of like, okay, well, you're struggling with that, I'm struggling with this. Let's work together and support each other.
Right.
But a lot of times they don't have a person to go to talk about that.
Yeah. All goes back to relationships and connections, doesn't it?
Very true.
Well, thank you, Jay. I appreciate your time here. I hope that our listeners will connect with you as well. Again, a big thank you to Hubbard for allowing us to record The Preventable. If you've liked what you heard and you want to continue to hear more, please subscribe anywhere where you can access your favorite podcast. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us at The Preventable, brought to you ad-free by Prevent+Ed. Prevent+Ed works to reduce or prevent the harms of alcohol and other drug use through education, intervention, and advocacy. Please visit their website at prevented.org. Like what you heard? Rate, review, and subscribe to stay up to date with what we are serving on The Preventable.